the Two Men and a Business Continuity Plan podcast. Navigating success through uncertainty.
Hello, and welcome to our podcast aptly named Two Men and a Business Continuity Plan with Charlie and James. Let's have a look at who Charlie and James are then. Charlie, short introduction.
Yeah, so just very briefly, utilities, Army utilities, followed by 16 years having my own business, Plan B Consulting, and then I'm just working for Data Barracks at the moment. So a sort of business continuity crisis management person by trade.
Thank you. And I'm James McAllister. I'm basically 30 years within a policing environment. Did lots of very exciting things all over the world, and then discovered business continuity in the latter sort of third of my career. And then when I popped out of the cops, I opened up my own consultancy. And I've known Charlie now for 20 years. So yeah, unfortunately, we've bumped heads for 20 years. Right, let's have a look at what we're going to do today then. For those of you who've read the title, does your organisation really care about resilience? Well, every organisation says resilience is important. It's in the annual report. It's on the risk register. It's mentioned in board meetings. There's a policy somewhere on the intranet. But when budgets are tight, priorities compete, and leadership attention shifts elsewhere, does the organisation really care about resilience? So in this episode, we explore the difference between organisations that genuinely value resilience and those that simply like the idea of it. We discuss why resilience often struggles to compete with cybersecurity, operational risk, compliance, and other business priorities, and how funding, leadership behaviour, training, exercising, and culture reveal what an organisation truly believes. So my first question for Charlie is all around the uncomfortable question: why do so many organisations say resilience is important, but struggle to demonstrate it in reality? So when things go horribly wrong, it's not quite as they thought it was going to be. So what do you think the reason is for that, Joe?
Yes, I just amuse your point about annual reports because, one of our preparation for when we go and speak to clients is all about read their, one of the things that you can find out about the organization is to read their annual reports. And you kind of read their annual reports and it tells you all about all the big fine business continuity you're doing. And then they kind of say, right, we need a gap analysis for our business continuity because it's not going very well and we need to do it a bit better. I'm not sure that there's a kind of gap between all the beautiful things you say in the annual report and actually the reality there. But, you can spin anything any well. But I think the problem is in the end with resilience, when there's a lot of focus on other things, it's very easy to not do it. And I think that's one of the problems we see is that, if you're in sales, then, you're only good as your last quarter or your last half year. And if you don't get in the sales, you get chucked out. If you're in operations, if you hit budget and hit the kind of plan and everyone notices, and, you're pretty tightly monitored. And, if you're sales, you're very, very tightly monitored. And, my organization there, we've had quite a throughput of sales because, if salespeople are not selling, they get moved on to the next job. Whereas business continuity managers, you can go 10 years without a serious incident. And does anyone die if business continuity is not done? No. You come in under budget, business continuity, you're actually you're in the end an expense. So I think one of the first reasons for that is that it's quite difficult to calibrate. Are we good? Are we any good? The business continuity manager can spin it how they want, and actually. So it's quite difficult to calibrate. So I think that's one of the difficulties with business continuity is it's quite difficult to know how good we really are. I don't know if you find that in your experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's that lovely saying, isn't there, about, Resilience is viewed like an insurance policy. Everybody values it up until they have to pay for it because it sounds brilliant, doesn't it? Resilience. I think one of the major problems is cyber is slapping you in the face. Risk has always been there, even though quite often they don't pay attention to risk. Ops, as you
Yes.
says, has got its performance targets, but business continuity, nobody quite understands what it is. I mean, I always, when I'm teaching, get the students to do if you're in a lift with somebody who you haven't seen for ages and they go, "Oh, what are you doing now, Charlie?" And you go, "Oh, I'm doing business continuity." Will they go, "Oh yeah, I know what that is. It's absolutely essential, isn't it, in the workplace?" Or do you think they'll go either, "What's that?" or "Thanks very much." Because I wrote an article for a police magazine years ago called Business Continuity, What Do You Mean It's Not Sexy? Because cyber is very sexy, isn't it? Whereas business continuity, it's like, it is like digging the trenches. It's essential, but no one quite gets it until the shots start firing over your head. And then, you're in a trench. It's great because you're relatively safe. But it's hard until you have the incident, the disruption,
I
and things
think,
go over
yeah.
wrong.
I think there's a little bit there. I think it may be may downgrade. I write a kind of whole series of blogs on these sort of things, and I haven't really done the trends, but I think about sort of 7 or 8 years ago, I was quite down about business continuity. To say, that's when resilience first happened. Everyone, oh, we must do resilience. Business continuity was a bit of a backwater. And I just generally think, and we're very lucky, the people we really interact with business continuity people usually paying us, so they usually have an interest in what we're doing, and they're kind of quite enthusiastic for whatever reason. They're either around kicking or screaming to employ you, or actually they say, no, this is quite a threat. We need to really do something on this, and we need to do it properly. So we're going to get somebody who knows what they're talking about to do it. But I think on the whole, I think business continuity has come into the business parlance, and people at the business end, I think senior managers understand that they have to do it. So I think there is more established business continuity, and I think over my time, and I'm interested in your comment on this, is that senior managers do think that business continuity is an important thing. What level of important thing it is, that might be a different debate, but I do think they think it's an important thing, and I think it has entered a little bit more mainstream, like health and safety and all the risk. It has entered that kind of business things that you have to do. It's just one of those jobs doing business. I don't just. I'll come on to cybersecurity. Just interested in your thoughts on that. Is whether you think sort of more managers talk about it and roughly understanding and take it seriously.
No,
Ah,
I think they're happy if they've got a plan. They think it's all
yeah,
about a plan. I describe it as the miracle plan. You open it and angels sing and miracle
yeah.
happens. And they think it's a plan. They don't understand. It's a management system. It's a way of life. It's culture. It's woven into the fabric of the organization
Mm,
because if it's not, it doesn't work. If it's just a plan, break glass, press button in anger, you open it, no one's really read it. The people who wrote it have forgotten about it or were never
mm,
really the operational people who needed to be developing the plan. They haven't really done much on exercising because the exercises are pretty poor. And then on the day when they get it, they rely on the plan. The plan doesn't work, then it's horribly wrong. And this is what that sort of, I mean, do you think they actually understand what it's all
no,
about?
yeah, maybe you're right on that a little bit of maybe they talk the talk, but yeah, I do think it is more mainstream. Let's come on to the cyber bit because I think the cyber quite interesting. There was a sort of time before sort of COVID when buildings was the thing, and that was what business continuity originally was invented for. There was ITDR for IT, and there was basically business continuity. It was all about what do you do if the IRA blows up your blows up your insurance office. These are 1990 sort of things. What happens is it blows out. How do you continue on your business? Because you can't deliver call centers, you can't deliver large amounts of people because working at home wasn't a thing. And then there was and then, with COVID, buildings became not really important. So one of our kind of main kind of reasons for existing was about building. Buildings still are important, manufacturing, all that kind of stuff, but they become less important. But I think with the cyber threat, as the cyber threat goes up, that we see companies cybered almost every week, if not every day. And you can see for JLR from Marks and Spencer, there's some serious money lost in it. So nobody doubts it's a big impact. But I think people forget about they kind of concentrate a little bit, and their cash is spent on preparing, stopping the bad guys getting in. I think that's perfectly reasonable. But I think they forget about the two things that we offer, maybe three things that offer. First of all is continuity of operations, your manual workarounds, all that sort of stuff. In business content, we don't really care whether someone cybered our IT system or whether it's a crowd strike or whether it just dies for whatever reason it is, or, that AWS has an outage. So, well, what we care about is how do you continue to business, and that's you're relying on your business continuity plan. You're relying, hopefully, on our crisis plan for the reputational management, and you're also relying on our communications plan for, statutory notifications and also managing reputation. So we have a lot to offer. But as you say, I sometimes think senior managers rather buy a new kind of whiz bang, a dark trace, a kind of one of those upfront systems. Whereas, are you better off actually spending a bit less money on that and a bit more money on recovery? Backups, talk about backups maybe later, but spending more money on the recovery, because that's really what it makes the difference. Bad guys want to get you, they want to get you, and you can go and make yourself nice and hard so that, or your organization, so that people can't get you, so they get the next door neighbor. But there's only so much hardening you can do.
But do you think senior managers, the board in most organizations, understand that cyber doesn't recover you? Because I think they think when you say cyber security, they think from conception to completion. They think cyber's going to do all that. When, as we know, really cyber's all in the training, the preparatory act, the investigation. They're not actually doing much when things are going horribly wrong, because it's either IT and DR, containing, eradicating, recovering from backup. And in the meantime, ops using business continuity plans and procedures to do those lovely workarounds and get you to an MBCO level, your minimum business continuity objective level, your minimum level of service provision. By the time you hit your critical timescale, your MTPD, they're doing all of that. I'm not sure whether the people at the top think, well, we've got cyber, so it's end to end. Because the people I talk to, there is a real misconception about, because I use it as an example in a diagram of a cyber incident happens, who's doing what? Really about response and command and control. But they all think it's all cyber-led. Of course it's not cyber-led.
No.
Cyber's got no idea what recovery looks like.
No, cyber do the techie bit. And I think cyber has much more a seat at the table than business continuity is. You got your CTOs or your CISOs or, those people are Cs. You don't see very much, chief resilience officer, though there are a few around, but there's not quite so many around as, and then I've never seen a chief business continuity officer. So, so I think that whole the whole cyber piece, to me, almost one of the biggest differentiators you can do, and I have to express an interest in my company sells backups, or Databricks sell backups, but to me, one of the absolutely key things is that if you don't have immutable unchangeable and air gap backups. And you've seen for lots of organizations and sort of things like Marks and Spencer's or the Western Isles, kinds of where, you have your main system, your backups, and they wipe out both because they know it makes much more difficult recovery. That is when you're in the weeks and months recovery. If you have really good backups, you're in, days, a week or so. And to me, that's what makes the difference rather than some of these upfront systems. But I think we concentrate too much on that kind of the upfront, the day-to-day management, and less on the kind of resilient organization, what is actually going to make some of the difference. And I think some of our business continuity and the ability to manage those incidents successfully, manage your reputation, is where the battle is won. And it's, not always one in your level of preparation or the level of hardness of your organization.
Do you think, I mean, if we look at, you've opened the door to cyber. If you compare your cyber budget with maybe your wider resilience budget focusing on BC, how would you say they? Yeah, Charlie's laughing in the background because I can see it on my webcam, and his shoulders are going up and down. Because what would you say the comparison is between cyber budget and BC
10
budget?
to 1, 100 to 1. Yeah.
But as we know, cyber's great, but the academic think said it's not a case of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. You're going to get a cyber attack which is going to bring down your operations. So you can do all the preparatory work you like. You can be Johnny Concrete as hard as you want as an organization, but they're still going to get in.
And if they want to
stop you performing. So don't you think the balance needs to change somehow? There's so many examples. I mean, Marks and Spencer's is a classic example of, it's great having all the cyber all you like, but clearly the BC didn't work because they didn't get up and running for 46 days.
Yeah, because they basically had all their systems wiped out and they just didn't
But as we know, you've got to go without systems. So in the event of, what is the lowest possible common denominator you can go to? And how do we, like operational resilience is doing now, these got the aggressive exit strategies because the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, the Bank of England is saying, yeah, that's great that you're doing the best you can to ensure that your suppliers are resilient. However, in the event that they aren't there, what are you going to do to maintain your important business services? So should we be learning from OpRes and saying, yeah, great, but what if IT doesn't come back within 4 days? What if it doesn't come back for 14 days? How long can we survive without IT? And if we haven't got IT, do you think they really know what the most important parts of their organization are to their wider stakeholders?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. But I think if you just had taken that ops res thing for a second, I think one of the points here with ops res is the reason it's been very successful and it's being done is because the regulator comes and checks on you. The regulator comes up and says, actually, I want to see your exercise. I want to see all your workings. I want to see, your impact tolerances. I want to actually sign off your impact tolerances. So I think if it's important and the regulator says it's important, the people do it. I'm sure we'd love a consultant that to be business continuity is mandatory in all organization or even all, even all listed organization, but it's not. And and so it was always going to be a kind of third child rather than the first child because somebody looks at it. I look at local authorities. There's the law that local authorities must have business continuity in place, and I get some of the echoes. I don't follow too closely some of the stuff from the Scotland local authorities where they're not have business continuity, man. Anybody doing it for months, even years, they gap it. There's so much. Sorry?
If you look at the history of the Civil Contingencies Act,
the
Civil Contingencies Act, as you know, Category 1 responders, Category 2s, the Cat 1s have got to have it the Cat 2s have got to share information about what they would do in the event of. And it's meant to bring this harmonious synergy between the emergency responders and the critical national infrastructure people. But the emergency responders, bear in mind, 2005, we are 21 years into this. And as you've recognised, hardly anybody in reality is doing business continuity to an extent that in a severe disruption they'd be able to recover the most important things they do. And local authorities, I've got to say, lovely, massively underfunded, horribly politically led, and have no idea really in a business continuity world what they're actually trying to do. But there's an act of parliament that says they've got to have it, but it's got no teeth.
Yeah,
Bruce
no one ever
Mann,
goes and audits them.
Well, no, because the problem, Bruce Mann, who was the then head of the Civil Contingency Secretariat, a big driver for, because I was in London working on another project at this time, so we had a lot to do with the Cabinet Office and the other emergency responders. They were coming up with an enhancement programme that was going to give it teeth. So a little bit like Ofsted, Ofwat. If you're underperforming as a local authority and your audit says that in business continuity or emergency planning or whatever, you're underperforming, those results are published like Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary does.
Yeah.
And if you get to an extent where you aren't delivering, even though you put an action plan in place, they can replace your senior management. That was the idea. But guess what happened? General election, governmental change.
Yeah.
And that was just lost in the ether. So
no, I think
do get regulatory makes you do it.
Yeah.
Most organisations we work with aren't regulated. So
and you see that quite a lot of the local authorities that have had cyber attacks, I think that they've managed them pretty poorly in response because of the fact is that they haven't had those business continuity plans in for recovery. So you can see some of the lack of business continuity. Sometimes I think their focus is a lot more on emergency planning because they see that more as a threat than the business continuity. And then the cyber attack comes along and absolutely gets them. I do have some sympathy because they just have no money at all. And they're busy trying to do more with less or less with less or just try and cope with the stuff they've got. So I do have sympathy. But I think, the whole point it comes down to op resin is that, unless someone actually either in the organization or in government champions this and checks on it, you go for lowest common denominator because there's so many different competing things in business. And if someone's not checking or not making sure you do it, or you might do it a bit, but in the end, who shouts loudest or who's going to get you sacked if you don't do it is going to be the person who gets the priority in budget. Unfortunately, that's a bit of a fact of life.
So do you think we need to get more leadership buy-in and more understanding I read all the time on the internet, there's what the board should know about cyber, what the board should know about operational resilience, what the board should know about this. Do you think the board are actually reading this? Because I obviously, as we know, audit and governance generally comes out of the board through this chief exec into the organisation. And if one of their KPIs is around those things that you said on the first 2 minutes of this podcast, it's in the annual report, waxing lyrical about how fantastic we are when it comes to resilience. Is no one going, but how do we prove that? Isn't it all about evidence to support this is what we say we can do, but where is the evidence to support that? And is that leadership's problem, or is it their fault?
Yeah, I'm not sure about this sort of proving business continuity. Sometimes, it's sometimes a bit of a nebulous thing to prove. How do you actually prove how resilient you are? I've been doing some work on maturity matrices and kind of trying to say how do you improve? Because if you say how do we improve, well, we do 2 exercises a year. Let's do 4 exercises a year. Well, that is an improvement. Does that mean we do 4 better exercises a year, or do we just do 4 exercises a year and we just actually instead of doing we do 3 1 hours rather than won 3 hours
Yeah, but
together.
isn't it
So
all about aim objectives and measurable outcomes? I mean, I've reviewed post-exercise reports and exercise programs and looked at them and thought, what on earth are they trying to do here? What are they trying to do with the exercises? They're running exercises because it's a tick for audit. They're running
yeah,
exercises because they feel they have to. But the exercises are so poor and so misdirected that the outcomes of the exercise are not anywhere near measuring resilience, which, as we know, isn't a plan. It's how are people going to perform on the day under stress with the solutions they have available to them in challenging situations. So if the exercises aren't doing that, then clearly you can't measure. It doesn't matter how many. I'm not big on let's run 10 exercises because we're really great then. I'd rather run one exercise, give them a good going over in it, and truly evaluate whether or not they know what they should be doing.
Yeah, I think an exercise is yours is a good point. I think exercises to me is not so much about proving resilience, but I think they're education basically. That you're busy
Yeah.
trying to teach people, say, look, these are some of the situations you're faced, and are you dealing with this in a specific way, or are you dealing other way you're going to deal with the response going to provide a successful income, or are you all over the place and actually you don't really have much of a clue on doing it? So to me, I always see through the exercises as a kind of learning lens as opposed to a kind of more testing. If you have a really good performing board, they do really well, it shows that they're actually pretty resilient. Maybe I should do more of the latter than the former, but I kind of see that there's not that many organizations, which there's a few in this life which I've come by and said that's a cracking, they are pretty good actually. There's done some work with a private bank, and you just look at some of the sort of senior managers there and say, you obviously get it. You're pretty good at
Yeah.
this.
I
But I
think the
don't see
ones that
how
have
often
had it in
exercise do you.
reality are better than the ones that have never had it in reality because they then appreciate actually the plan is there to lean on.
Hmm.
I'm always, a crappy plan with a great team, you'll
Yeah.
get through it. A
Hmm.
crappy team with a great plan, you'll have a dreadful time because
Yeah.
it's about humans.
Yeah, it is about humans there, and that's why it's sometimes more difficult to measure the kind of response. I think, we've taken spent quite a lot of time looking at kind of trying to measure exercises and trying to measure exercise teams and producing a lovely matrix of all the kind of different elements of exercises, and on the whole, people don't actually like that at
No, they
all.
don't.
They don't like a numerical score at the end of it, because and one of the reasons why I invented the numerical score for exercise is it was kind of, we saw a team, they did all right the first time, the second time a year later they did worse, but it's quite difficult into kind of to sort of say that. You can say it is, you weren't as good as last year, but it's kind of like, it's just a kind of an opinion. But if you got a numerical score, you say you got 56 last year and you're 42 this year, so obviously you're not getting better, you're getting worse. So
You've got to be careful, obviously, as we both know, with either the post-exercise report or the verbal feedback, that you don't just say last year you got 60, this year you got 42, therefore you're worse off, and they go, but in which areas? And then you can't
yeah,
support that. Clearly, the whole point for organisations to learn going forward is they need examples of what they did and
yes,
why it didn't measure up, or why it was exceptional, or why it was adequate, because
yeah.
otherwise, you can't learn from
Yeah,
it.
with a good
Charlie
scoring
has,
matrix,
yeah,
you can put those things into place.
yeah,
But yes, it is, there's a little bit of balancing there to have.
yeah, yeah. Right. I mean, time has run away from us. I've got a few wise words that I noted down before. You get any just final wise words?
I think my final wise words is in the resilience piece is, management backup's absolutely essential. And if the management don't take you seriously, just say, "Oh, Charlie, go away in business continuity. Don't disturb us apart from the annual exercise." It's a bit soul destroying. If people don't take your job seriously and you do, it is soul destroying. So my always answer to that is, if they don't take you seriously, go and find another job and go and find somebody who does take you seriously once this done. There are not an awful lot of people with the skills. So if you've got good business continuity skills, you're not being taken seriously, go and find somebody who will take you seriously, because you'll get much more satisfaction. So that's my thought for the day.
Okay. I've got a few. Resilience is demonstrated through decisions, not policies. Funding is one of the clearest indicators of commitment. If you're always scrambling around trying to get money to do things, then you can tell it's not being taken seriously. Training and exercising are better indicators of how well you're performing than a plan. I've seen plans that look beautiful, but there was no content.
Yeah.
It's got to be in the content. Leadership behavior shapes resilience culture, and it does. If the people at the top are
Absolutely
behind BC or whatever, then that will shape the organization's direction. And all the other competing things like resilience, operational resilience, business continuity, they should be complementary, not competing priorities. And they understand, like the great example of Marks and Spencer's and the other recent ones we've had, they've got to work together in a crisis.
Yeah.
Not in silos. So once again, Charlie, thank you very much for today. And for our audience, thank you very much for being with us. If you've enjoyed what you like, please subscribe. Please pass us on to any of your colleagues who might or would like to listen to us. Comment. And don't forget, we're on all the platforms now. Any ideas for future podcasts, please send through to Business Continuity Training, and they will get through to us. And that's it for this occasion. So I will see you next time. Charlie, last words?
Yep. No, we'll see you then. We'll see you next time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.